The SEAT Mii Electric is in fact 3 cars, and no, that's not some sort of riddle, just that it also comes with a Volkswagen e-up badge and a Skoda Citigo E badge. So basically they're near identical 4-seat 5-door hatchback triplets, which is no bad thing because it means you can find a version that suits you no matter which brand you prefer. And yes, it is quite little. I mean, it looks like I could just put one on each foot and go roller skating around, but no matter what it looks like, this is one of Electrifying.com's real-world second-hand favourites, which probably needs some explaining. So here goes. Even when new, this was one of the cheapest new pure electric cars you could buy at around 20,000 quid after the government's grant. Not exactly peanuts when you consider a petrol Mii costs about 12, but not bad for an electric version when you consider what it offers. The battery is pretty modest, but then again, so is the Mii, so you get a range of 161 miles on the official test cycle. But we found that the Mii can be extremely efficient if you drive carefully or mostly in town, and really does seem to hit 150 plus miles most of the time, even in colder weather, although if you do hammer it up and down a motorway, you will see that drop. Okay, so it's not got the super rapid charging rate of some cars, but with a battery this small, it doesn't really need it. Pull into a service station or supermarket and it'll take a feed of 40 kilowatts, meaning you'll need about 50 minutes to top up on a public DC charger. Flat to full on a home wall box takes about 5.5 hours. The charging flap is here, and because the Mii is genuinely wee, you can park it any which way and the cable will still reach. I know, that's a small point, but it is convenient, which is kind of a theme with this car. Value for money is a key phrase when talking about the SEAT Mii Electric rather than cheap, because this isn't a high-end luxury car and it shouldn't really be judged like that. I actually think it's got pretty much everything that you're likely to need. One thing to note though, back there is no third seatbelt in the rear. So this is strictly a 4-seater, although people up front do have plenty of space. Now, I'm not small, just over 6 foot, and I am perfectly comfortable. And I have it on good authority, Ginny Buckley, that people of more modest dimensions also can find a pretty good driving position. It does actually make the most of the space it's got in here, even though this was a car that was originally designed to have a petrol or diesel engine up front. And back there, the boot is actually probably a little bit bigger than you think. No, it's not the Grand Canyon, but in city car terms, it's absolutely killing it. You can get a couple of bags or a suitcase in there without smashing them to bits. And it's got a handy split floor. Oh. But do you know what I like best about the SEAT Mii Electric? It's the fact that it's actually a little bit old school. See that? It's a key. Yes, the Mii does have central locking, but when you want to start the car, you take this, you put it into a hole and you turn it. The car is now ready to drive. There's no prodding or pushing of a little start button where you switch the car off and on again, and then you're completely confused as to whether you can actually pull away. For younger viewers who might not recognise it, this is a handbrake. Now, we used to have these in older cars, and it's a mechanical linkage to the brakes that you put on when you don't want your car to roll around anywhere. It's handy to stop your vehicle from rolling off cliffs or down hills. It also allows you to do handbrake turns, which you're going to have to ask your parents about. But still, it's one of those simple mechanical objects that just makes me feel a little bit safer. There's not another little electronic button that you have to press to make your car stay still. See that? Even the gear stick is simple. It's just a traditional automatic push-pull gear stick. There's no rotary controls or push buttons or flashing lights or things you don't need. It works. Even the dials up in that binnacle are exactly the same as you'd find in any other normal SEAT Mii, except that you get a battery indicator and a charge thing. It's really very simple. Also, there's no massive touchscreen in the middle of the dash to distract you. Instead, you get a simple phone dock in which you place your smartphone and then you can use your own maps and apps, or SEAT's own if you prefer. One neat little thing I do like about that is that behind it is actually a little USB port so you can keep your cables neat and your phone charged. It's very good. I know, I sound like someone who gets grumpy with new technology and ends up shouting at Amazon Alexa, but I promise you, I'm not. It's just that the SEAT Mii Electric's simplicity is actually quite comforting. I guarantee anybody who has ever driven a car before could get into this and within 30 seconds would be driving away. It really is that simple. Yes, it does look a bit dated compared to some of the new electric kit, but I actually find that slightly comforting. And yes, there is kit, by the way, full details of which you can find on electrifying.com, but you're talking about heated seats, a radio, aircon and a heated windscreen, rather than masses and masses of complicated kit. On the road, the Mii is actually pretty good. I think it's a lot better than it should be for its size, and that's true of all of the cars, the Citigo E and the E-Up from Volkswagen. I just like them. I mean, they're small and they're nippy, but they're sure-footed on a back road and they will go down a motorway no problem at all. The ride, it's good at keeping your back straight even if you hit like a sleeping policeman or a pothole or something, but it's a small car, so you shouldn't expect to be as plush as a big saloon. The weird thing about a car like the Mii Electric is that it can be one of those vehicles, and especially if you're charging around town and you're keeping that energy in the battery really topped up, that gives you that light bulb moment that you just think, I get it. I understand where electric can fit into my life. If I lived in a town or just did lots and lots of short journeys, this car would be utterly perfect. It's not sexy, but it would work. It's got 3 modes, normal, and then a little button down here that does Eco and Eco Plus, and they range from normal, which is all of the power, which still isn't that much power, to Eco Plus, which is basically a range-saving, range-extending mode that will limit the top speed to 59 miles an hour. It switches off the aircon and knocks back the throttle response. Interestingly, I never use Eco Plus because I don't understand it. It just feels a bit too slow. It's useful in an emergency, but I wouldn't go too mad with it. Generally, I just leave it in the normal mode and charge it up more. If you do hammer this down a motorway, it might be comfortable enough, but you will see your predicted range drop by about half, simply because electric cars are not at their best at a constant speed on a motorway. They're much better at doing mixed driving or urban stuff. That's the way that they create the most regen braking. And that is one thing I do use quite a lot in this car. If you take the gear stick and put it one back from D into B mode, can you see the car slowing down? That actually makes this into a proper one pedal driving car. So I'm not touching the brake at all, and the car's still slowing down. Now what that does is it turns the motor into a generator and uses the braking force to both slow the car and put some more charge back into the battery. It just claws back some of that energy and makes this car really quite efficient. Now obviously you do that a lot more in town, and when you're on a motorway you're just running the motor at constant speed and it uses more energy. Whereas, you know, if you're doing lanes or something, you need to slow down quite a lot. You're on off the throttle, you're genuinely clawing back quite a lot of energy. Bluntly, no, there haven't been any issues with the Mii Electric, bar a recall to fix some battery issues on cars produced between May and June of 2020, so it's not really that many cars. The battery and motor have far less moving parts than a petrol or diesel car, so like all electric vehicles, they're very simple and reliable. After that, it's just the usual stuff to look for on cars that have covered a few miles: curbed alloys, bodywork scuffs and general wear and tear. Though this is one place where the Mii's simplicity helps. Just push the few buttons that there are and check that everything works. One thing to note though, even though the Mii scored a full 5 stars for safety in its original official test, it got downgraded to 3 stars recently. Now, that doesn't mean that the Mii is unsafe, just that the tests have expanded to include more modern active safety systems that the Mii doesn't have. The Mii Electric actually went out of production in 2021, which means that even though technically you can't buy a brand new one anymore, there might be 1 or 2 knocking about at dealers ready for a deal. And although you haven't been able to buy a petrol Mii since the middle of 2019, it doesn't mean that there are thousands and thousands of electric versions knocking around on the second-hand market. Just take a look. The SEAT Mii Electric really hasn't been around long enough to get properly long in the tooth, so there's not massive deals to be done. But if you look carefully, you can still save money, mainly because there's been a lot more modern electric cars appearing in the past couple of years. For a nearly new one with very few miles, you're looking at 20 to 23,000 quid, although that's for a car with delivery miles and a brand new number plate. For cars with under 5,000 miles on the clock, you're still looking at around 18 grand, with even ex-demo cars with 7,000 miles still hovering around the 17 grand mark. It's not huge savings, but definitely worth having. In terms of being a good car, then yes, the SEAT Mii Electric really does hit the spot. In fact, it's one of those cars that could neatly ease away any worries you may have about going electric. It's super efficient, dead easy to drive, and very handy around town. Yes, it does look a little bit dated on the inside, and it's not exactly the sexiest car in the world, but I wouldn't hesitate to recommend one if you're knocking around town or doing short journeys. This is where it gets a bit more complicated, so let's look at the Skoda first. The Citigo E was only on sale for a few months, and is pretty much identical to the SEAT except for some badges and a different nose. There were some stripped-out versions called the SE though, and these did without things like DC rapid charging, so you must watch out for the specifications. The VW is tricky, as there have been a few different versions with ever-improving battery tech and equipment. If you're comparing the latest versions though, the prices tend to be a little higher than the SEAT, even though it's actually the same car. That seems daft, but it is likely to be worth more when you sell too. As ever, if you want to know more about the SEAT Mii Electric or any of its competition like the Nissan Leaf or Renault Zoe, then please do visit electrifying.com and we'll help you out. We are here to clear the air.